on the right. Yeah, next slide. Thick froths of yellow sea foam covered the entire beach, which essentially ruined our vacation. I was obviously horrified by this sight, but seeing the sea foam or spume also intrigued me in a way. And once I got home, I did more research to find out that spume was caused by dissolved organic material, which is excreted during algal blooms. So as you can see in this picture, algal blooms can be quite severe, and they're actually caused by an excess of nutrients, namely nitrates and phosphates. And these come from fertilizer runoff, and because fertilizer and nitrates and phosphates are also good for plant growth, but obviously they also cause algal blooms. They can lead to eutrophication, which eventually causes the death of animal life in the ocean as the algae use up all of the oxygen. Next slide. So this experience prompted me to begin a research project in which I conducted a statistical analysis to determine the nitrogen output of my school. And you may be wondering, why nitrogen? Well, firstly, as I explained, the nitrates released from fertilizer during food production does oftentimes end up in marine biomes, which causes the algal blooms and the spume overgrowth that I had experienced. But also we always hear about the carbon footprint, which obviously is a very important metric of emissions. But the nitrous oxide, which is released by cars and during manufacturing processes, is actually 300 times more potent than CO2, meaning that it actually traps 300 times more heat in the atmosphere. And so obviously we want to consider that as well when we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions. So through this project, I found that the major sectors that were emitting nitrogen were food, transportation, and utilities. And I was actually invited to present my data and recommendations at the school district, where I proposed a Meatless Mondays initiative, a food share program, and an initiative to change from maybe beef to, if we can't go completely meatless, from beef to other types of meat like poultry. Because obviously they require less nutrients and less amount of food for every pound of meat that they produce. But after presenting, I was definitely faced with a mixed response, because on one hand, the district office told me that they would try to do a Meatless Mondays, and they hired a specialist to look at the nitrogen output of the district. But on the other hand, I was met with a sense of complacency where they were like, we just can't change anything. These are the rules, we have to follow them. And it also felt that my ideas weren't seen as important just because I was a sophomore in high school. But as it is, when you're met with obstacles, that also kind of motivates you to work even harder to achieve your goal. And that's how I felt after presenting to the district. So I also came up with another research proposal for 2 novel genetically engineered bacteria to promote sea ice formation and carbon sequestration. When I first got involved in climate, it was definitely more on the sciencey side. But after this experience at the school district, I decided to work more on education and getting involved in empowerment. Next slide. Okay, awesome. So here's a picture of my research poster, and I'm not exactly sure if you can see, but at least you can tell from the pie chart in the graph that a huge majority is from food, and that actually comes out to 85,481 metric tons per year, which is a huge amount. It's almost hard to fathom how much nitrogen is released. Yeah, next slide. So in my community, I decided to get involved in both in-person and virtual climate strikes once the pandemic hit. I'm sure Jamie has a lot more experience with climate strikes, so I won't go into too much depth about that. But I also helped plan a sustainability dinner for local teens in my community, teaching them about a vegan lifestyle. But I also got to learn about a lot of cool issues like environmental justice, which we definitely just heard an amazing presentation about. But it was really eye-opening to hear about these different facets of climate change, which I'd never previously considered. I also presented my nitrogen research at a local science symposium and an Earth Day event. And again, it was kind of like my experience where once I learned what the issue was, I was very motivated to tackle it. And the same thing when I presented in my community, it was really empowering to see other people realize that that is a big issue and that they pledged to make a change in their lifestyle to lower their nitrogen output. Lastly, I joined a nonprofit in my community called Greenkeepers, and we hosted a 21-day challenge to educate youth about a sustainable lifestyle. And we basically would tell people that for today, maybe, try to donate clothes, because obviously clothes contribute in a huge part to climate change as well, fast fashion. And also, try to compost and maybe use the dishwasher instead of washing clothes to save water. Yeah, next slide. So now one of the biggest projects that I've worked on is a composting system at my high school. And the first step of doing this was a waste audit, which is basically we looked through 40 pounds of trash that our school had produced from the bins, and we sorted it into compost, recycle, and trash. And we found that 70% of all of the waste that our school produces could be composted, which made sure that our project idea was very viable, just because that is around 28 pounds of trash. And then 10% could be recycled. And so for that recyclable portion, we obviously do have recycle bins already, but again, we have to raise awareness because people maybe don't know what can be recycled and what cannot be. So once we conducted this waste audit, we contacted the administration and custodians, and we had a huge meeting with around 40 people, with teachers, parent representatives, and we basically convinced them that this is a project that needs to happen and that is very, very viable, given that 28 pounds of the waste could be composted. And then lastly, we had a partnership with Stop Waste, which is a local organization based in Oakland. And they provided us with a lot of resources to conduct the waste audit, and they provided us with compost bins as well. I'm sorry, I think there's a gardener on my end, so let me try to, give me like 1 second and I'll restart. Alrighty, sorry about that, everyone. Hopefully the audio is a little better now. So we were able to partner with Stop Waste to get all the compost bins, and we were able to implement this project in February of this year. And we also had members from our organization teach the school community about composting to ensure that even if we have the composting bins, if nobody puts their compostable material in the compost bins, obviously we're not going to see a change. So that education aspect was also really crucial in ensuring that our project was successful. Next slide. Yeah, so here's just a picture of us doing the waste audit. As you can see, we had a lot of different bins. All of those bags were from the school trash, and we were basically just sorting everything out. So now I'm a core member of Greenkeepers, meaning that I help lead a lot of the projects that we do. The first project is called Being Green in Quarantine, which is a video series about sustainability. And it's a video series with 5 parts. And each video we focus on different ways about how people in their own homes can be more sustainable and lead a more sustainable lifestyle. Additionally, we'll be hosting an educational climate panel, which is somewhat similar to the Zero Waste Youth Convergence, in which we'll educate people about climate change and careers in the environmental field. And lastly, the project that I'm the most involved with and I'm leading is the Life for a Life COVID-19 Memorial Tree Planting. And in this project, we'll be planting trees as a tribute to those who have passed away due to the coronavirus in my county. So I live in Alameda County, where there have been around 440 people who have passed away. So for each person who has passed away, we will be planting, bringing a new life in the form of a tree, which obviously sequesters a lot of carbon and is obviously good for almost every aspect, even reduces crime in areas. So planting trees around my community just to pay tribute. Next slide. This was a quote from Greta Thunberg, who is obviously one of the most outspoken youth activists of our generation, who said, "You must unite behind the science, you must take action, you must do the impossible, because giving up can never be an option." And I think this quote is just so impactful because it is not an option to give up, because this is our future, and it's our responsibility as youth to stand up for the issues that matter the most to us, whether it be by working on the science aspect or maybe taking action in your own community. Next slide. So if you would like to learn more about greenkeepers, here are some links: our Facebook, our Instagram, and our website. And this just talks about all of the past projects we've done. We are an international organization with a branch in China, so we've also done projects there. But also you can learn about the creek cleanups we've done, leaf mulchings, all of these events that we've been involved in around our community. And then next slide. Thank you all for listening to my presentation. If you would like to help us, if you're a youth in your community and you would like to get involved with any of these projects that we're working on, I put my email on this slide. So feel free to shoot me an email, and it would be amazing if we can spread our message and carry out these initiatives in even more communities. If you would like to help us in any way, even donating, again, that is my email to contact. So thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, and now we're gonna get into some questions. And the first question is, what advice would you give to someone wanting to start their own organizing movement?
Yeah, so I would say that first you have to identify an issue that is really meaningful to you, because climate change is a pretty big, wide field, and there are a lot of different aspects in which you can get involved. So first figure out one main thing that you want to accomplish. For example, if you want to change the legislation, then you can start maybe with find a local organization. Or if you want to do something similar to what I've done, maybe a composting project, then the first step is obviously to identify your cause. And then the next step is to try to find, I would say, more people in your community who are passionate about the same issue. Because as one person, as at least my experience with being one person who was interested in it, was that people don't take you as seriously compared to when you have a huge group. So try to find like-minded individuals who are also very passionate about climate change. And then create an action plan, and then start reaching out to the people who are in power or the people who can make a change. Whether it be on a local level, like your school, your district, or even on a national level or your state level, contacting your representatives.
Sounds good. And our next question is, how have your relationships/networks influenced you along the way?
I think I've definitely been influenced by the people in my community who are first taking a stand. I know one person in my community named Shreya, who I believe is presenting in another session. She is also in my school district, so I got to know her through a mutual acquaintance, and I worked with her. And I think seeing how other people have that passion also motivates you as well. And then if you can watch things like documentaries, I know were very impactful in my case about introducing me to issues that were important, or I mean, at least I never knew about before I'd even watched them. So I think if you find a group of like-minded people who are really passionate, who are willing to get involved and give their time, I think it's really easy to get motivated by them and motivate others as well.
Sounds good. And one last question is, what is a success that is helping you now?
I think once we had established our composting project, I think just realizing that we could affect change in our community was definitely very motivating. Because at first, when I'd done this nitrogen research, when I proposed it to the school district, like I mentioned, I was met with a sense of complacency, and that did motivate me to take action. So once I saw that my efforts were being validated through this composting project, that definitely motivated me to start these other projects like the tree planting, and also seeing, once we've contacted schools who want the trees on their campus, seeing how enthusiastic they are about this project definitely motivates me as well. So just seeing everybody get excited and motivated about this cause, just wanting to make a difference in their community, definitely has inspired me.
Yes, that's some really great work that you're doing. And now we're going to move on to the next presentation by Jamie.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. I'm Jamie, and I think you can go to the next slide. So a little bit of an introduction about me. I know it's already been said, but I'm Jamie. I'm 17 years old, and I'm a senior at St. Francis High School, and I've been a climate activist for about 4 years now. Similar to Annika, I really started to get interested in climate activism in middle school. But I was really frustrated because every time I tried to bring it up to parents or adults, they would just say, you know, do a good job in school, get a good education now, and then when you're our age, you can make change. And I was like, there's not enough time for that. And it was really frustrating. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. I'm sure that's the reason why a lot of you are on this call. So when in my freshman year, I started speaking at city council meetings, trying to make change. I got involved with local organizations by attending events like this one. And back then, the world of environmental activism was still mostly made up of adults, and I was usually the only young person in the room. It definitely made things hard to affect change at first. But then things really changed in 2018 when the UN IPCC report came out. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it basically gave us until the year 2030 to drastically reduce greenhouse gases globally to give ourselves the best chance of survival as a species, which is really scary. And it impacted a lot of youth around the world. And that's when Greta Thunberg started really becoming famous for what she was doing, and that's when the youth climate movement really was sparked. So after that IPCC report, I worked with some friends, we started planning protests, and things really went big. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Sunrise Movement, which is a national youth movement dedicated to helping pass the Green New Deal and stop the climate crisis. And I'm also going to talk about local work that we've been doing here that you can plug into so that you can make a change. So next slide. So what is the Sunrise Movement? That's my first introduction. You can go to the next slide. So we are a group of youth. Most of the people in our organization are under the age of 35, and we are a national movement. We've really grown a lot over the past few years, and our goal is to stop climate change and, by the Green New Deal, creates millions of good jobs in the process. So can I actually get some audience participation here? Can 3 people come off mute and say A, B, and C? Maybe one person just unmute yourself and say A, just read it out.
Make climate change an urgent priority across America.
Thank you. Next person for B.
End the corrupting influence of fossil fuels CEOs in our politics. And
thank you. And C, can someone go? Anyone?
Elect leaders who stand up for the health and well-being of all people.
Thank you. So that's the mission of the Sunrise Movement, and we have definitely, I know those are really big goals, but if you go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about our guiding principles going into those goals. So we operate under the knowledge that our air, home, and water are really being threatened by the climate crisis, and that the world has the technology and the solutions that are ready to go. We have the money and the tech to stop the climate crisis, but a greedy few at the top are dividing us and driving us towards catastrophe. So the only way that we can really win is by refusing to be divided, because we are the majority. People, everyone across the world really cares about the climate crisis when they hear more about it. So when we really come together, we have a lot of power. So that's a really big part of the Sunrise Movement, is bringing people together. So you can go to the next slide. So if you look to the right here where it says our theory of change, so we have a couple, this is a very shortened list of what our theory of change is, but basically we act around 3 big principles: our people power, political power, and the people's alignment. So our people power is, the Sunrise Movement is working towards building an active base of public support, talking to people, interpersonal connections, and growing our people power through escalated moral protests like strikes. Next, we're working towards political power and creating a critical mass of enthusiastically supportive public officials. So we've made great strides towards this in the past few years, voting out corrupt officials and voting in real leaders who will stand with us. And finally, we're working towards the People's Alignment, which is aligning with other movements and groups that are united towards the same goals that we are. Groups like Black Lives Matter, groups like March for Our Lives, and just other progressive organizations that are united towards the same goals that we are. So you can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to walk you through the history of the Civil Rights Movement really fast. I'm just going to go through a bunch of slides and talk about our past actions. So this was November 2018, right after the Green New Deal was really going to be pushed. And this was when the Sunrise Movement had our first big action. They took over Nancy Pelosi's office. And this was right after the UN IPCC report came out. So this was really big and it got a lot of media attention. You can go to the next slide. Right after that, in December, they took over the Capitol building and another big protest, got loads of media attention, really grew the movement. Next slide. Then again, I'm sure you're seeing a pattern here. They took over Mitch McConnell's office in February of 2019. And again, lots of big media attention and the movement was really starting to grow and take off at this point. You can go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, cool. Then in May, this was our first local action. We had a climate strike here. I know it was really small. That was in downtown San Jose. This slide's fine. You can, oh, maybe go back one. Yeah, the one after this one. Yeah. So after this, next slide, there we go. We took over the DNC headquarters in June of 2019. They actually stayed out there for about 3 days calling for a climate debate and it was successful. I don't know if you remember, but in I think July, they had a climate debate for all the Democratic primary candidates, which was the first time that had ever happened. So that was really big. Next slide. Then that September, that was another day of global striking. This is an image of the climate strike here in San Jose that we organized. It was really powerful. We had about 3,000 attendees and we broke a lot of records. We got a lot of news attention. You can go to the next slide. There's just another photo of our local strike. Thank you. So yeah. You can even go to the next slide. It's just another picture of the climate strikes. This day was really powerful and it really brought a lot of youth together around this shared movement. You can go to the next slide. Then in December, we had another global climate strike. Things were really starting to ramp up. Next slide. This is an image of the San Francisco Sunrise and Youth versus Apocalypse strike outside of BlackRock. It was successful. We got BlackRock, which is one of the biggest investors in fossil fuels in the world, to start divesting from fossil fuels. So it was really huge. You can go to the next slide. This was February. We took over the Capitol building. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm in the image on the left. This was about 200 youth and we came together in the Capitol building and we took it over and we called our senators to step up for the Green New Deal or get out of our way because this is about our future and we can't afford to compromise any longer. So it was a really powerful action. Next slide, yeah. So then the coronavirus hit and things got kind of tough organizing wise. We had to put everything on social media for a few months. These are just some images. I know that's a really great photo of me in the middle, making a really great face. So we just had to move everything online and things were a little bit dicey for a little while, but you can go to the next slide. And we were actually able to accumulate a lot of power over those first few months. We did a ton of phone banking for candidates, and we really made some big changes electorally in this nation. The candidate on the very, I think, left on your screen, Jamal Bowman, we made over 1 million calls for him, and he won in a landslide vote against the incumbent in his district. And we did a lot of phone banking over the summer and it was really powerful. So we're looking forward to electing a lot of Green New Deal champions this November. You can go to the next slide. At the same time, we were also joining in on the fight for Black Lives Matter because of the, what was going on in this nation. We had to really drop some of what Sunrise was doing and show up for this other movement because they're still going through a lot, and it's really important that we stand with them. You can go to the next slide. So then in this fall, August and September, we did a series of wide awake actions, which involved waking up corrupt politicians very early in the morning. So this was our local one. Sam Ricardo isn't super corrupt, but we did have some demands for him. And so this is us at his house at about 6:30 in the morning and calling for a series of things. And these actions were really successful. They started out at Mitch McConnell's house and they really spread across the country. So they were really powerful. And actually groups like Black Lives Matter and the March for Our Lives group have started picking this up and doing this as well. So it's become a really powerful action tactic. You can go to the next slide. Sorry for all of these actions and slides. I know it's a lot. Finally, we're doing a lot of work right now around elections and the fires. These are just some images of the fires. It was really grounding in what we're really fighting for. This is an emergency and we can't afford to wait any longer. So next slide. That brings me to my next part of the presentation where I'm going to be talking about why this is such a big issue and how we can help, what the solutions look like. So this is a farm I had the privilege of visiting a couple weeks ago. These two farmers run this land, and I don't know if you can see, but the hills behind their farm were completely devastated by the fires. They narrowly missed being burned, and they actually had to fight the fires themselves because there weren't enough CAL FIRE people there to help them. This is just a reminder of what we're fighting for. 4 million acres burned this year in California, so it's really, it's scary. You can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, we need change now, and oh, we're going a little too far. We definitely need some change now, and I'll just go ahead here. This is fine. So we're going to talk about the Green New Deal, which is a solution towards ending the climate crisis, because people are really being hit not only by the climate crisis, but also the crisis of the pandemic right now. And the solution can really help solve a lot of problems, not only for the climate crisis, but also economic problems that our country is facing. So you can go to the next slide. So back in the 1930s, when this country had the Great Depression, there was the New Deal, and it created a lot of jobs for people. And it also solved some big infrastructure problems that our nation was having. So the Green New Deal had been sort of based off of the New Deal. And the goals are to create 100% green energy over the next 10 years in line with the UN IPCC report. Also to have net zero emissions by 2050, again, with the IPCC report. And they will do that by upgrading buildings, building a smarter power grid. And all of this will be a lot of work. And so it'll create millions of jobs. And if we make a commitment with the Green New Deal to pledged for those jobs to be well paying and have good worker rights, we can really turn this economy around as well and take our nation out of the struggle that it's been in for the past few decades. So we're also looking at retraining workers that have been in fossil fuel based jobs and retraining them to go into clean energy jobs. We're looking at changing electric vehicles and public transit, and changing farmer technology, and really centering all of this around supporting marginalized communities as well. So next slide. So this may sound like a big dream, right? This may sound like impossible, right? But it's actually gotten a lot more support in the past few months because of the coronavirus and because of the work that groups like the Sunrise Movement have been doing. Back in 2018 or early 2019, when the Green New Deal was first announced, it was like political suicide for politicians to even talk about supporting the Green New Deal. But because of the work that groups like the Sunrise Movement have been doing, it's gotten so much more support, and it's it used to be unthinkable for something like that to be even mentioned at a presidential debate. And now it's just constantly being mentioned. And even a very moderate Democratic candidate like Joe Biden has policy that echoes the Green New Deal. And his climate policy was actually written by our founder of Sunrise, Varsity. So it's the work that the Sunrise Movement is having an impact on politics right now. So our plan after the election, no matter who the president is, we're going to be pushing for a new normal. And there's a big stimulus package going out in January and February of 2021, and there's trillions of dollars that will be invested. So it's a huge chance. It's our biggest chance for a Green New Deal that we've ever had. And a reminder is that a lot of progressive change has historically happened in the moderate candidates when we push that person for change. So for example, Lyndon B. Johnson was not he was sort of a moderate candidate, but civil rights groups were able to push him to make change, and FDR was also a moderate candidate, and labor groups were able to push him to pass the New Deal. So it's time to fight. Next slide. So finally, I'll paste in the chat how you can get involved with our group. You can join our email list, you can join our Slack. We'd love to have you come and be a part of our team. So I'm ready to take questions. Sorry, I know that was probably a little bit long. But thank you for having me. I've been really honored to be here today.
No worries, and thank you both for being here. So we do have some questions, and I'll start off by asking Jamie some questions. So what is an organizing strategy that you found is most successful? And this can be both in non-COVID times and also in COVID times.
Yeah, totally. So during non-COVID times, striking was our biggest, the best way that we were really making change. Sunrise Movement kind of revolves around this idea of nonviolent direct action. So taking to the streets and really standing up and refusing to sit down, or sitting down and refusing to stand up. That really shuts down society from doing its work, and it forces our leaders to make the change that we're demanding. We're not demanding something crazy, we're demanding a livable future. That's something that everyone should be able to get behind. So striking has really been historically and now one of our most powerful tactics.
Yes, and we have a question for both of you, so maybe one of you could start by answering and then the other. So how do you build a community while leaning on community during hard times?
I guess I can start if that's okay with you, Annika. So definitely building community between other groups is a really important part of activism. In this area, we're so lucky to have so many other amazing grassroots organizers in action around here. So I think the more that we can connect, the better. I think it just all goes back to people power for me. I don't know exactly how to answer this question perfectly, but I'll start out by saying that, yeah, the more we connect, the more we work together, the better, because a lot of our groups have the same goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that the way that you first have to build community is obviously by raising awareness about the issue. And I think that really Jamie's work has done a great job in raising awareness about that. So once you get those people fired up about the issue, and then you introduce to them ways about how they can get involved, that's a really great way to build that community.
Definitely. And the next question for both of you is, how do you keep self-care as a priority to prevent burnout, especially with the need for momentum? And Annika, you can start.
Yeah, sure. I think, I don't know, I don't really see climate action as something that really gives me burnout, in a sense that it's something that's really important, but also something that if you can always like contribute a little bit to it. It doesn't always have to be like, it's not like an all or nothing. You can also contribute to climate action in small ways. And obviously for self-care, just like taking a break sometimes. This is a very important issue, but don't, punish yourself if you don't feel like you're contributing enough, because every small step that you take is making the difference. So try your best, but always take breaks and just just take small steps small changes that you can do in your everyday lives.
Yeah, in my group, we definitely get a lot of burnout. And it's important to know when you are stressed and know when to take a break. Because I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but there's this quote or proverb or something that goes something along the lines of, you can't pour from an empty vessel. Like, you can't do meaningful work if you yourself aren't being fulfilled, if you yourself aren't meeting your daily needs. So it's important to take care of yourself first and foremost so that you can do the work that you want to be involved in. So yeah, just echoing what Anika was saying, it's important to take care of yourself and to take time off if you need it. This past few weeks has been definitely crazy for me, at least, with college apps and the election and everything coming up. So it's a good reminder. Always don't be afraid to take a break and, recognize that about yourself.
Definitely. And this next one is a question that was posed to Annika, but I think both of you can shed some light on it. So can you share more about being green in quarantine and how to get people involved in social media or other outlets?
Yeah, I guess I can get started with this question. So just to go over what being green in quarantine is, it's just a video series that we're putting on YouTube and on Instagram about how people can make small sustainable changes in their lives and contribute in their own ways in this whole group effort of climate activism, and how people can get involved in social media and other outlets. One, obviously, you can join another organization and support to their own efforts, but also, contacting just a group of people around you. Like, maybe you have a close group of maybe all of your Facebook friends, just send them a message like, hey, I'm starting this initiative. Please support the Instagram page. And if you have anything you would like to contribute, feel free to do that as well. So you can do it by joining a group. You can obviously also do it by yourself if you would like, and find a group of close friends who are willing to support you. And again, just keep on constantly posting, raising awareness about your issue, trying to spread that awareness by contacting maybe other people who can help you publicize, like your school or other organizations. But just try to get as many people involved as you can and push a meaningful message.
Yeah, I would also like to add that because of the coronavirus, we've all been super disconnected from each other, and it's important to bring that social connection back together as much as we can, and activism is a really great way to do that. So definitely using social media to connect, but also checking in with friends and just, I mean, if you're feeling lonely, joining groups like Anika's and mine or just other local activism, it's a really great way to see people and talk to people and have that meaningful social connection, because we've all been feeling a little more lonely these past few months. So it's really important to, if you show up, I promise you will get to know some people and you'll have that meaningful social connection.
Mm-hmm. And now we have a question: how do I take action during the pandemic? And Jamie, you can start.
Sure. So it was definitely a struggle for us in the beginning, trying to figure out how to take action during the pandemic, but I think we've actually found some really great ways to do that. Like I mentioned before, phone banking has become really big. If you want to take action literally in the next 2 weeks, I'll put my email in the chat so you can shoot me an email about that and I can connect you, because phone banks are really good ways to get out the vote and to show up for politicians who are really going to work for the youth. I would also say, our group has been doing a lot of trying to make sure our protests and our in-person actions are low risk but high reward. So for example, the Wide Awake actions, usually we would have a big 3,000 person strike and we would have a lot of people really close together, but having a small group of people do a really impactful strike was more powerful in that moment. So we've been trying to plan more actions that are low risk, smaller groups of people, but that can really have that kick impact. An example of this that's going to be happening over the next few weeks is we're going to be showing up at the places where ballots will be counted and videotaping the representatives who are supposed to be counting those ballots and asking them if they're going to commit to counting every single ballot before calling the election in their area. So that's something that's really powerful, because the Trump administration is going to try to, say that not all ballots should be counted, or try to push this narrative that, you can just call an election before things are really, before counting mail-in votes, for example. So we're doing that to try to change the narrative there. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities to do stuff during quarantine.
Yeah, similar to what Jamie said, it definitely was a struggle adapting to the online atmosphere, because we're always so used to having events in person, because when you really show up in person, it definitely has a larger impact. But I think social media is a great way to raise awareness still. And that's something that my organization Greenkeepers has been working on. Like the Being Green in Quarantine series, like ideally we would have in-person seminars to teach people about these things. But I think posting the same information online is still a good way to get your message out, because it can also increase the impact, because more people can see it if you posted it online. And so going through social media is one way to do it. And also, as Jamie mentioned, doing these events that are low risk, even during COVID, by having smaller groups, can still be a way that you can affect change. Like our tree planting project, if we do want to get it started now, obviously the coronavirus is not ending anytime soon. So the way we're going to execute this project is by working in small groups, obviously masked and everything, so we can still carry out our final project. And lastly, you can always do some sort of environmental research, because research, like obviously the UN report that they published, that was done based on the research that researchers have been doing. So if you would like to contribute to that as well, doing something similar to what I did by finding the nitrogen output, maybe looking at carbon emissions, whatever kind of research you can do by compiling data and spreading that can also be a good way to stay engaged online.
Yeah, and we have less than 5 minutes, so we just have one question. One last question. How can middle school kids get involved?
I think I've been unmuted, so I guess I'm going first. With the Sunrise Movement, we definitely welcome kids that are middle school age. I know it's hard to plug in at first, and it's definitely daunting, but I've actually met a lot of middle school organizers and really looked up to them. Like there's so many people that I know that are like, I want to be that little kid when I grow up, because they're so amazing. The organizing they've been doing is so amazing. I actually have a friend, Julia, who started a Sunrise Palo Alto hub when she was in 8th grade. So it's definitely something you can do. And so there are definitely ways you can plug in. Again, you can totally join the Sunrise Movement or other groups as well. It's a space that's open and welcoming to people of all ages. And we actually have, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Julia's coming to, that's great. We have support specifically for middle schoolers in our national group as well. We have some calls just for middle schoolers to really get to know each other from across the country. So if you're interested in that, again, I'll drop my email so you can get involved. I'll help you with that.
Yeah, I think the easiest way for middle schoolers to get involved is generally to join a larger chapter, because as a middle schooler, you may not have all of the experience needed. So if you join a larger global or national organization, or even local organization as a smaller chapter, that can really give you a lot of good experience as you're starting off. And then once you feel like maybe once you get into high school, you've had a couple of years of experience, then obviously feel free to start your own organization or your own chapter. But probably as a middle schooler, I mean, obviously a lot of middle schoolers are amazing and they can do these things just as they're starting off, which is props to them. But I think for a lot of people, try to partner with an organization that already exists is a great way to get started.
Yes, definitely. So thank you both for speaking today, and thank you to all our attendees for showing up. And in 10 minutes, we're going to have our lunchtime session, which is optional, but we encourage all of you to try to make it. We're going to have discussions about an array of topics that relate to climate change in breakout rooms, and we're also going to have a Kahoot game. So if you just like any of those things, please join us for our lunch session, and you can find the link to that in your schedule. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, everyone.